But we want to continue to turn our attention here a little bit to the discourse here in the United States in the political realm vis-a-vis the current escalation in the conflict. And as we continue, we're very happy to be joined by the 2024 presidential candidate for the Party for Socialism and Liberation, Claudia De La Cruz. Claudia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I could be wrong about this, but I think I have it right. I think you were the only presidential candidate from any party of any type here in the United States who was at the many large demonstrations that took place over the weekend in solidarity with Palestine. Why would you be at a demonstration like that? Why was it important for you to be there?
I mean, this is a matter of justice, Eugene. This is a matter of justice, is a matter of humanity, is a matter of standing for what's right. You know, people have been talking about this being a story of two sides, and we have to hear the two sides, but no one's actually been hearing the story of the Palestinians for the last 75 years. And this is a David and Goliath story. This is the oppressor versus the oppressed, the colonized versus the colonizer. And so it's very clear. There was nowhere else to be but out on the streets in defense and support of the Palestinian people. It is true that war is ugly, that the loss of human life is tragic. It is gut-wrenching, and I have been going through the most difficult times, as many of us have, those of us who have a conscience, seeing the images of parents carrying their babies, seeing the wiping out of an entire, space where people live and where they're forced to live as if they're in an open air prison. It is horrendous for civilians who did not sign up for war to have to live through war that has been imposed and waged on the Palestinian people by colonial and apartheid forces that are the Israeli forces, and that is paid for by the US government. Like, the US government takes money from tax-paying people in this country and sends $4 billion a year to mass murder Israeli children. I mean, you were talking about the numbers. The numbers are horrendous. You're talking about over 100 children, who are killed. They're killed by the Israeli. And so what moral authority and what level of, grace can you grant to a state that is one colonial, that's an apartheid state, that is a racist state, and that obviously works hand in hand with U.S. imperialism? And so, again, there was no other place to be than outside in the streets with the Palestinian people, demanding that Palestine be freed from a colonial regime that has been there for way too long and imposed and created by the United States of America.
I think it's so important that you framed it that way, because the US is, of course, backing this to the tilt. They've already sent more weapons. They've sent an aircraft carrier. And I just, I'm kind of watching the rhetoric from abroad, and I'm in the Middle East. So, I mean, the conversation here is much more open in a way that it's not in the United States. So, one thing that I have noticed is over the years, it has seemed as though progressives and even liberals were more willing to speak up on the issue of Palestine and for Palestinian rights. But it's like the second there's a reaction, and this is the point I've seen you make, the second there's a reaction to colonial violence, it's like suddenly all that's off the table. And I'm just curious, as somebody who's running for president, somebody who is involved in politically organizing, somebody who, is involved in rallying for Palestine, what is it like being in that space during this time when it's kind of like all these people suddenly just fade away because they're not willing to stand up when it actually matters?
You can't sell out your principles. That's my answer. There is no way that you could sell out your integrity, your principles, and your humanity to what is the system. Ultimately, a lot of these folks, whether they're progressive, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, they're aligning themselves with the U.S. imperialism. They're aligning themselves with colonialism. And the only reason for anyone not to take a stand in support of what is right is because you're going to get something out of that exploitation. You're going to get something out of that oppression. And so there has been, whatever that looks like, whether it is maintaining your position as an elected official or maintaining those who are, cutting your check or guaranteeing your seat, and you're not standing necessarily in your space because the masses of people have placed you there. Obviously, corporations have placed you there. Obviously, finance capital has placed you there. Obviously. And so, they are securing their position within the system. And I think, what I've learned through political organizing and what I hold dear from the possibility of being able to do this political campaign that we're engaged in, to be able to build organization, is to be able to give the working class the confidence to stand up against these type of atrocities, whether they happen in the United States or they happen across seas, because we know that the same system that is serving to equip the Israeli forces is the same system that beats our kids and kills our kids in the streets for the only reason of being Black, for the only reason of being poor, because it's inherent. White supremacy is inherent to U.S. imperialism, is inherent to colonialism. We just got to see the way in which these people are talking about the Palestinians. Barbaric. That's what the colonizers utilized against Native Indigenous people and still do. Barbaric is what the white folks that lynched a whole lot of Black people called Black slaves that were fighting to be free. And so if we can't make those connections, we're gone. And so these progressive and liberals are just basically showing their colors and are showing exactly who are the ones that are cutting their check.
Let me also ask you this. You are running for president of the United States, so perhaps ostensibly in 2025, come January 20th, you too will be confronted with this question about how to address the U.S. relationship to the Israeli government. What sorts of proposals would you have about how the U.S. should position itself vis-a-vis this conflict?
I think it's important to raise and say that peace without justice isn't peace. And based on that principle, we have to stop financing massacres across the globe. We need to stop investing 90% of our budget into the military. We need to start divesting from death, and our platform is very clear on that. We are proposing a 90% cut to the military budget because we understand that there are people in the United States that are in need of those funds to be able to live, and people elsewhere need and deserve the right to live with dignity and with justice. It is completely crazy and it's unbelievable that the United States of America would spend close to $1 trillion a year in mechanisms of death and war. And so, we are proposing to build relationships with nation states that are based on solidarity. The United States could have called, Biden could have called and said, hey, this is not a time for bombing. Maybe this is a time for us to be able to engage in some sort of conversation about how we're going to give the land back to the Palestinian people. And how are we going to plan for people to come back? And think about a transition and how that would look. But the United States is uninterested in doing that. I mean, I was reading the Wall Street Journal today and was seeing how, all these tech and surveillance companies, Lockheed Martin and, Palantir's Technologies, their stocks are surging. War is profit. And so we need to stop as a nation investing in war machine, investing in a war economy. We need to be able to build another type of society here domestically and other types of relationships. And so I think we're very clear that the Palestinians have the right to exist, and they have the right to resist, and they have the right to defend themselves. And we want to create a society where Palestinians don't have to fear that the United States will send anything, anywhere, to continue to wipe them from the face of the earth.
Well, I love the way you put that. And I also just want to ask you about the broader implications of all of this, because obviously you put this in the context of U.S. imperialism and you are running for president. So what do we say to the rest of the military-industrial complex that this is a part of?
What do we say? What do we say to the rest of the military complex? I mean, again, our at least as speaking as a presidential candidate for the Party for Socialism and Liberation, we're very clear on our line as anti-militarism, anti-imperialism, and anti-war. And we understand that corporations like Lockheed Martin, corporations like Palantir Technology should not be profiting from death. And so we also talk about seizing corporations. And obviously, these corporations need to either cease to exist or be recreated to actually serve in benefit of the people. But when we're talking about the military industrial complex, is those complex precisely that we want to do away with, because they can't exist if we are looking to build peace and justice in this world.
Claudia De La Cruz, the 2024 presidential candidate for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Thanks so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you for having me.